When Victoria Scone left Drag Race UK 3 due to her knee injury, I was devastated. But now she's back on Canada vs. the World and once again shaking up the way we think about drag and the language we use to describe drag performers. Let's talk fish. Before we start, I'm Dr. Jake, YouTube's loudest and proudest physician, and today your cunning linguist. This is Fishgate. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell. You know you want to. Now, before we take a deep dive into the ocean's biome, we gotta discuss casting on RuPaul's Drag Race. In the early seasons of Drag Race, only performers who identified as cis males at the time of their application were cast. Notably, cast members who are not cis men, although didn't necessarily identify as such at the time of casting, have been cast on the show even in its early and less inclusive seasons, but they typically came out after their season was cast. Kylie Sonique Love was the first to publicly acknowledge her identity as a trans woman after season 2's filming, and Monica Beverly Hills actually came out as a trans woman during her time on season 5. And as the American version of the show plotted on, the gender wall, or the sugar wall? Can I call it the sugar wall? Slowly eroded. Peppermint openly identified as a trans woman prior to her appearance on season 9, as did Gia Gunn on All Stars 4 and a host of other amazing trans woman drag queens. And the exclusion of women on the show was clearly intentional. RuPaul stated in an interview with The Guardian that he would not have cast Peppermint had she begun her chemical and physical transition prior to her appearance on Drag Race. He said, "You can identify as a woman and say you're transitioning, but it changes once you start changing your body. It takes on a different thing. It changes the whole concept of what we're doing." Progress was slow, but the sugar wall developed a new crack on season 13 with the inclusion of Gottmik, the series' first trans man. And this casting choice foreshadowed yet another controversial but necessary erosion in the show's exclusion of women: the casting of Victoria Scone, the series' first cis woman on Drag Race UK Series 3. Now, Victoria Scone is not remarkable solely because she is a woman, although that did create some interesting headlines. Not only did she have some absolutely iconic looks and performances, but more importantly, she was unafraid to speak her mind. After an ill-guided jab at her weight by Crystal Versace,
your biggest competition. Why?
Not competition, just bigger.
Oh, just a big.
she clapped back.
I've had really bad eating disorders. I've dealt with bulimia.
She let the queens know that reading is all in good fun, but that mocking someone solely because of their weight would not fly. And as a physician, I guess that's something that I need to touch on. A big part of my job is to recognize health complications that might arise from obesity and help people make choices that will improve their health. But I do subdivide health into physical and mental. And when people feel bad about their weight, their mental health suffers. I don't think that's a hot take. If you think that's a hot take, I don't want you here. Please just click off of this video right now. I literally don't want you anywhere near my comment section, so go flame my video that I made about obesity. I edited it and the editing is terrible. Go there. Here's a link. It's right up here. Now, am I saying that jokes about weight have no place on Drag Race? No, of course not. I'm not the joke police. And I don't think there's any police department that would hire me because I hate hierarchy and authority. Fight the system. And for the record, I don't think I want any police anywhere near my channel either. Black Lives Matter, Trans Lives Matter. Go watch a video about something else. But getting back to the point, there are myriad factors that determine whether a joke is perceived as funny. These include who's telling the joke, the target of the joke, the topic of the joke, the phrasing, the tone and inflection of the joke. I mean, what is joke? But Crystal's fat joke did not sit well with Victoria. I didn't perceive that Victoria was hugely hurt by this joke because she's a strong woman who has developed an extremely thick skin, though that's probably her place to speak about and not mine. In any case, she eloquently expressed why the joke was problematic. So now let's fast forward to Canada versus the World. Victoria is cast, her new haircut is bomb, she's giving great confessional, and the first challenge is to write a bitch track to Bonjour High, and here's where the shark gets skewered. Stephanie Prince, a cis male drag queen, had the following line in her verse: "Looking fishy, catch me, flip me, stampede queen, y'all be ready." And Victoria Scone honed in on the word fishy. If you're not familiar, the term fish is defined as Wikipedia as a term used to describe when a drag queen looks like a cisgendered woman. Now, this is hardly the first time that fishy has been used on the show in this context. Just a few examples: Gia Gunn in season 6, Vivian Panay considered herself the fishiest contestant of season 5, and the fish trope was also used in the season 6 Rusical. Ben de la Creme provided illicit fish oil to Courtney Act's version of Penny, an uptight country girl, to turn her into the more seductive and confident Fishy Penny, played by Adore Delano. But Victoria took issue with the word's use in Stephanie's verse, and here's the thrust of Victoria's argument. Fish is often used as a derogatory term to describe vaginas, implying that they have a fishy smell. Using that term is misogynistic, and when she sees misogyny, she speaks up.
But people say it like, oh, I look like a biological woman, so I look fishy because that connects a woman's vagina to being smelling like a fish.
And just throwing in my doctor perspective, vaginas that are healthy do not typically smell like fish. Vaginas that are healthy can actually have a variety of fragrances. They can also smell like nothing, and so can feet and penises and body hair and body odor and lots of other things about people can smell like whatever they want. Okay, I suppose there could be a subset of people who have vaginas that at baseline smell like fish, but that's certainly not the default smell of vaginas. And granted, I don't really go around sniffing a ton of vaginas, so I can't really tell you if there is a default smell, but what I've been told is that the default smell is not much. And I've gotten away from the point again, so let's just shift back, shall we? When I first watched this episode, I was shocked that no one had brought this issue to our attention, but then thinking through it a second time, I realized that the reason that this hasn't been brought up before is just perspective. Cis women make up a large proportion of the audience of Drag Race, but until Victoria, there hasn't been a cis woman on the show. I mean, we've had some strong cis women on the show before in some of the makeover challenges, but never in the main cast. So while it's fascinating that this has never been brought up before, I now am not surprised. The voices on Drag Race are typically cis male gay voices. It's only recently that we've seen a burgeoning of diversity of perspective on the show. So now diving into the actual issue with the word fish, the first and the most worrisome thing is just the conflated connection between gender identity and genitalia. And actually, we need to talk about this issue in terms of trans people. Anti-trans advocates and even some allies are often hyperfixated on genitals as a proxy for gender. For example, remember this interview with Katie Couric and Carmen Carrera?
Your private parts are different now, aren't they?
That's clearly an example of someone not understanding the relationship between genitalia and gender identity in the slightest. Now, there are times when genitalia are important to think about, and the main one is when providing medical care. Genitals and biological sex are hugely important to doctors. We as doctors need to categorize people so that we can ensure that their development is appropriate, understand what diseases they are at risk for, and consider different treatments depending on factors related to hormonal differences. Understanding male and female physiology helps us to determine if there are certain hormonal diseases that could affect sexual development and fertility, not to mention that there are certain diseases that directly affect genital anatomy, like testicular or ovarian torsion and testicular and ovarian cancer, and cervical cancer, which, by the way, brings us back full circle to vaginas. Just putting that out there. But I think most people having this discussion are not doctors, and really, the discussion of transness and genitals is generally irrelevant. And it's also irrelevant because of issue number 2. The perception of femininity and masculinity, at least by others, are often determined by what are called secondary sex characteristics. That is to say, the indicators of sex that are not genitalia. For example, the widened hips that are typical of female maturation and the thickened body hair indicative of increased testosterone production in a man. And there are certainly individuals who fall outside of societal gender norms and outside of physiologic norms. And I don't mean to say that they're any less of a man or a woman. That's not what this is about. I'm just saying that these secondary sex characteristics are what we look at externally to determine maleness and femaleness. And these perceptions, along with the ones related to genitals, are definitely damaging to trans people, even without focusing on genitalia. Much of the cis population's discourse, as well as a lot of the cis queer discussion around transness, was previously about being able to pass or not be detected as a trans person. This kind of characterization discredits trans people who are visibly trans. Many trans people don't fully realize their gender identity until later in life after the secondary sex characteristics of their gender assigned at birth develop. And some don't wish to chemically or physically transition. And of course, some trans people don't identify with a gender binary at all. Fortunately, I think the overall discussion, at least within the LGBTQ community, is changing drastically, and a large part of the community has become accepting of a less rigid gender binary, particularly as it applies to trans people, which honestly could be an entire topic for another video. But now circling all the way back to the overarching issue, most of the people on Drag Race were not born with vaginas. Almost all of them were born with penises. As the literal first cis woman on the show, Victoria is a minority, and she has a voice that deserves some special attention. And as she said, the word fish has a connotation that frankly stinks. Interestingly, we consider the wishes of trans people with regard to probative genital questions, and I think we also need to consider a cis perspective, namely Victoria's thoughts about the word fish and its connotations. And we do have the power to change language on the show to be more inclusive. For example, the opening song used to say, "May the best woman win," and now
They changed it to drag queen.
I don't think making that change negatively affected the quality of the show, but if you do, just pop off in the comments. Tell me what you think. In any case, the queens had some interesting responses to Victoria. The first was Stephanie Prince's. Now, let me be clear, I don't think Stephanie was trying to insult anyone when she used the word fishy. She's a fierce queen, and I think she was just trying to create a catchy lyric, but what she said is that the word fishy had been reclaimed. And that's not quite right. Stephanie Prince is a cis man and presumably does not have a vagina. Victoria Scone, on the other hand, is a cis woman with a vagina. And if you're not part of the group that is offended, it is literally impossible to reclaim a word. It's like if a straight man called me a and I got offended and his response was,
No. That's been reclaimed. You don't understand. It's not offensive anymore.
well, no baby, I do understand. It's literally not a word that's been used to describe you because you are not a gay man, and so therefore you cannot reclaim it. Just like the N-word for black people and the D-word for lesbians. And that's not a literal comparison. Those words have their own connotations. I'm not speaking for people in those groups. But here's the thing, you might have friends that are secure and okay with you using those types of words. But that doesn't mean that you get to tell someone else that gets offended that that word is reclaimed. Because if that one person hasn't reclaimed it for themselves, then you're kinda done. It's not reclaimed. And another thing, cis gay men clearly do have some beef, no pun intended, with women and their genitals. The notion of being a gold star gay, a gay person who has never had sex with a woman, or a platinum star gay, the same but born by C-section, so never having had contact with a vagina, is jokingly suggested as the pinnacle of gay male purity. But just because it's a joke and you don't mean any harm, doesn't mean that your joke doesn't hurt people. And by the way, I'm not claiming to be immune to misogyny. I've made that joke myself. I made it in one of my videos and my viewers called me out, as we all should when someone says something hurtful, just like Victoria Scone did in this episode of Canada versus the World. And by the way, I'm really sorry that I made that joke. I shouldn't have said it in the first place. But circling back again, there was one other response that piqued my interest, Vanity Milan's. She said,
So what we're not going to use from now on is the word fish because we're among an AFAB woman?
and that's an interesting take. It seems totally reasonable to me that if a word makes someone uncomfortable in your personal life, you might say, okay, I won't use that word around you. But on an internationally broadcasted television show, it's just a little bit different because you're no longer just talking to one person. Your voice is amplified and you're talking to potentially millions of people. Because like I said way back at the beginning of this video, many cis women watch Drag Race and normal, healthy vaginas don't smell fishy. And despite that, this term has been used to express general disgust about vaginas. So when you use the word fishy to describe yourself as feminine, you are invoking this thought of vaginas being smelly, even if you're using it in a way that you think is positive. And okay, quick aside from a very pro-choice doctor, the US's recent legislation on camping has made life not exactly easy for cis women. Control over their own body parts is being stripped away by, you guessed it, cis men. So I actually have tremendous empathy for Victoria. Words have power, and Victoria's comments to me are another version of reclaiming. Reclaiming by being honest about how a word hurts you, expressing that there is misogyny in this use of the word fish. But the ultimate question is this: what the hell do we do about it? And honestly, I don't know what the right answer is here. Do I think we need to just ban the use of the word fish in this context on Drag Race? I don't know, and I'm not Elon Musk banning parody on Twitter. But I do think that we need to listen to the only cis woman to have ever been cast in the history of this show, and I think we need to be thoughtful about the impact that words have. The word fish can certainly celebrate femininity in the right setting and the right context, but it can also alienate the very people that you might think it celebrates. So I think it's worthwhile to reconsider whether that word says what we want it to say and promotes an environment of inclusion. And perhaps we as a society overvalue certain types of drag, specifically drag that is hyper-focused on believability when compared to other forms of drag. One of the big draws of drag for me is that it subverts suffocating stereotypes about gender, but not only those of masculinity and men, of femininity and women as well. And I think that that can be accomplished without the use of the word fish. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you need to de-stress after watching this, you can take a moment and watch me fact check the medicine in Mean Girls. Right down there. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.